Good afternoon, Keith Tebow from FRC Media. Thank you for joining us. We are trying to speak to as many candidates as possible as we head toward the September 6th state primary. Today, I'm pleased to be joined in studio by Attorney Shannon Liss-Riordan. She is a Democratic candidate running for Attorney General in the September 6th primary. She's going to be facing former Boston City Councilor Andrea Campbell and Attorney Quentin Palfrey in that race to hopefully succeed. Current Attorney General and candidate for governor, Maura Healey. Shannon, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time. And welcome to Fall River.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
having me. Have you been to
me.
the area that much since you've been running?
Yes, I have been. I've been getting all around the state. It's been really great meeting with voters everywhere. So I've been in this area a few times.
You know, a lot of times when I'm speaking to the statewide candidates, I always say the following. Unless the candidate is from a local part of the state, people may not know who Shannon Liss-Riordan is. So give us a little overview of who you are and why you decided to run for Attorney General.
Oh, well, sure. Thank you. So I've spent my entire career taking on the biggest challenges and delivering big results for regular people. I have spent my entire legal career, more than 23 years, representing working people. I have fought for workers and for unions, and I've taken on some of the largest corporations in America and won, companies like Amazon and Starbucks and FedEx. I have recovered hundreds of millions of dollars that corporate America stole from working people. I've been widely recognized as one of the most effective lawyers in America. I'm really excited about this race for Attorney General to put my experience and my skills and my passion to work for all the people of Massachusetts.
One thing that people may remember who may have voted in the Democratic primary 2 years ago is you were on the ballot to run for Senate against Ed Markey. The big race there was, of course, with former Congressman Kennedy and Senator Markey. Those were the marquee names. You were there as well. What did you learn from that you're bringing to this campaign?
Well, I
mean, different races, obviously, but in terms of running a statewide campaign.
Yeah, no, I really loved getting out there around Massachusetts and talking to the voters everywhere. And that's what I've been doing in this campaign now. For the last 8 months, I have been out on the road. I've been talking to voters everywhere and hearing what's on their mind and wanting to know what the Attorney General's office can do to help them. And what I've been hearing is that people want someone who knows how to use the legal system to make their lives better. This is a very important position where we need a seasoned, experienced lawyer who knows how to work the court system. That's what I've been doing. I've been arguing and winning jury trials, appeals, and I have built the law here in Massachusetts case by case to enforce our laws and ensure more fairness for everyday people.
As you look at the role of Attorney General in general, Attorney General Maura Healey, been in office for the last 8 years. Is there anything that you can glean from her work that you'd like to maybe continue moving forward?
Yeah, Maura Healey's done a terrific job as Attorney General, so I am very excited about this opportunity to continue and expand on the important work she's done. There are some really big efforts that she's been involved in, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. For example, her handling of taking on the pharmaceutical industry for bringing us the opioid crisis. That crisis, we're still in the thick of it. It's affecting our families and our communities. I look forward to continuing her fight against major pharmaceutical corporations who have profited off of this devastating epidemic. The work she has done against ExxonMobil. There are huge corporations who've profited for decades off of fossil fuels and lied to us about their effect on our climate. So that's the type of high stakes impact litigation that I've been doing my whole career, and I look forward to continuing on this important work.
You know, I want to get into as many issues as we can in the short time that we have together, but one of the issues that for some people, they'll say Massachusetts, it doesn't impact Massachusetts, is the issue of abortion. Obviously, the Supreme Court ruled and threw out Roe versus Wade at the end of June. A lot of people will say, well, Massachusetts has strong abortion rights legislation that will protect the process of getting an abortion here in Massachusetts. Are there things that, as Attorney General, we can do to make that stronger in your mind?
Yes, absolutely. The Supreme Court's horrible decisions, particularly over this past term, it was just shocking to me. I've been a women's rights advocate since my college days. Right out of college, I co-founded a national organization for young women called the Third Wave. My first job was with Bella Abzug. I've been a feminist activist for my whole career, and I have spent the last 20 years of my career figuring out ways around bad Supreme Court decisions. We are very fortunate here in Massachusetts to have the Roe Act passed, but there is a lot more that needs to be done to make sure that abortion is safe and accessible for everyone who needs it across Massachusetts. And we're going to be seeing some legal battles unlike anything we have seen in our lifetimes as red states try to come into Massachusetts and impose their bans here. So it's really important that we have a seasoned, experienced attorney running the Attorney General's office to take on that fight. I will fight to protect patients here, to protect providers here, and make sure that abortion is available for anyone who needs it here, as well as people who are going to come in from other states who are going to need access to it as well.
Is that a fight, as you say, if attorneys from other states and attorneys general from other states that have abortion bans try to impose restrictions on Massachusetts in terms of people coming out of state into here? Do you view that as a state issue? The reason why I bring that up is I was speaking to a candidate running for Bristol County District Attorney, and I guess can those states go to district attorneys, or would they have to go through the states to try to mandate those extraditions or help in terms of?
No, I think a lot is going to fall onto state attorneys general,
Okay.
and I plan to be a leading attorney general across the country on these issues because the legislature now has put into effect some strengthened protections even beyond the Roe Act, which are important to prevent other states from coming in and doing that. But one thing I have learned from my career as a practicing lawyer is that laws don't enforce themselves. You need to have a seasoned, experienced lawyer who knows how to enforce the laws, and that is what I'm going to bring to the AG's office to make sure that people are protected, accessing services and providing services here.
You mentioned your work as a labor lawyer and also fighting some of the larger corporations that were not favorable to either employees or to individuals here in Massachusetts. How can you bolster that? And one item I want to bring up in particular, maybe we'll start with this, is there was scheduled to be a referendum on gig workers, Uber, Lyft, and the state Supreme Judicial Court threw that out. I believe you worked on that
Yes.
as well. How does that translate to some things you want to do moving forward?
Yes, so I was the first lawyer to take on the gig economy, misclassifying their workers as independent contractors and trying to avoid all of the responsibilities that employers have across Massachusetts. And it was the work that I started against Uber and then Lyft and DoorDash and Grubhub and others a decade ago that sparked a national conversation about the importance of these workers having employee rights. I've been in a chess match with these corporations for years, and the work that needs to be done in the Attorney General's office is carrying on that very important fight to get employment rights. I'm very glad that Maura Healey did jump in and bring a case against Uber and Lyft, and we need to have an attorney who knows how to take that fight on and continue it and win it as our next Attorney General.
One of the other things, without obviously not knowing any specific cases that may come up, but in general, how do you view the Attorney General as being that watchdog for the average Bay State resident in terms of going up against some of these large corporations?
The Attorney General is the people's lawyer. I have been working as a private Attorney General for more than 20 years. I'm ready on day one to step into the role to now expand my client representation from the thousands of workers who I've helped over the years now to the millions of residents of Massachusetts. So we need to be there to make sure that people are getting paid properly by their employers. And right now, it takes too long. I know from my law career that it can take weeks or months or even years for wage complaints to be addressed, and people who have had their wages stolen need the money now. They need to put food on the table tonight, they need to pay the rent tomorrow. So that's why I plan to set up a fund so that people who've had their wages stolen, haven't been paid properly, can go to the AG's office, get their pay right away, and then the AG's office, we can go after those bad actor employers. That's the way our unemployment system works. It's the way our workers' comp system works. Why not wage theft? And consumer protection. If you go to my website, we have a plan up about what I will do to strengthen consumer protection rights here in Massachusetts. The AG's office needs to be accessible for people to knock on our door, come in, call in with their complaints, and we will investigate them and we'll take on the issues where we can make a difference.
What role should the Attorney General play? I spoke to one of the candidates running for auditor last week, and she considers herself a watchdog in many ways, and obviously the Attorney General, as you said, is the people's lawyer. How can the Attorney General look for also ways that maybe some of your colleagues in state government may need some investigation? And one comes to mind is the MBTA, right? There's been a lot in the news, a lot in the Boston area, not much here in the South Coast. However, we are scheduled to get South Coast Rail here next year. So do you plan on investigating MBTA that may not be done between now and the time you may be elected?
There's a huge role for the AG to play in making sure that our public officials are held accountable to the law. And remember, I'm not a politician.
Right.
I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm a lawyer. So I will take on those cases on behalf of the people that will help the people of Massachusetts. We need to be investing more in public transportation. In the Boston area, there's the MBTA, and here there's South Rail needs to be available so that people can, get to their jobs. Affordable housing is such an issue now. There needs to be easier transport so people can get to where economic opportunity is and still be able to live somewhere where they might be able to afford the rent. I'm very concerned about the lack of resources. That we have not been putting enough resources into our public transportation. That is a big reason why I'm a huge supporter of the Fair Share Amendment, which will be on the ballot in November. We need to have sustained financing for our public transportation as well as for our public schools.
Yeah. I'd like to try to localize this a little bit. Again, a lot of times state candidates, when they're elected, they're in Boston for a good portion of their time. For years, I was born and raised here in Fall River on the South Coast. A lot of times, gateway cities like Fall River, New Bedford, Laurel, Lawrence, Lowell, will look at Boston and say, well, they're in Boston, they're not doing enough for us. I guess as Attorney General, and specifically for the South Coast, how can you play a role in making the lives of gateway cities, particularly, better?
Well, one thing that I have been hearing a lot about as I've been traveling all around Massachusetts is that people want the AG's office to be accessible to them. So while the main office of the Attorney General is in Boston, there are outposts in Springfield, Worcester, and in New Bedford. I would plan to keep those and look into whether we should have additional outposts as well, because people need to be able to call the AG's office with their complaints and get someone on the other side of the line who can answer them. They need to be able to walk in the door and be able to bring their complaints, and if the AG's office can't help, get referrals to where they can go for help. So I plan to be traveling around. I plan to be listening to people all across Massachusetts to find out what would you like the office to be doing. But I know ensuring that corporations are paying their workers correctly, making sure that corporations are not scamming consumers and bringing actions that will enforce our laws, it's going to make people's lives better.
Yeah. There's I was looking at your website and some of the topics you have under the issues that are important to you. A lot of it seems to be geared toward those that have been underrepresented for quite some time. And I guess I want to pull some of these questions together in the short time we have. The issues of housing, education, healthcare, LGBTQ rights. Cities like Fall River, obviously those issues are important in any community across the Commonwealth, but particularly gateway cities like Fall River. How can the Attorney General be that advocate, I guess a little more in depth in some of these issues I mentioned, housing, education, healthcare, to make an impact to cities, again, like Fall River, those that may have constituencies that were underrepresented in past times?
So The reason that I went to law school was because I wanted to get some real concrete tools that I could use to help people's lives. And that is what I've devoted myself to throughout my career, is representing those who haven't always had their voices heard. The big corporations, they've always had their high-priced, fancy lawyers, and I've always wanted to represent those whose voices need more to be heard. So I've prided myself through my career of representing, fighting for immigrant workers who so often have been taken advantage because employers think that they're not going to speak out and complain. An important component of my goals for the office are to help tenants stay in their homes. The high price of everything is what we're hearing talked about everywhere, and housing in particular it's just out of reach for so many families. So I plan to set up an office of the tenant advocate as part of the AG's office to help people stay in their homes, to help provide representation for tenants facing eviction. Right now our housing courts often serve as eviction mills, and the landlords have representation, but not the tenants. I want to make sure the tenants have good representation, that we're getting resources to them so that they can stay in their homes. We need to take care of issues like lead paint, which is still a huge issue for our housing stock in Massachusetts. Our laws passed in the 70s basically led to rampant discrimination against families with children under the age of 6, rather than the de-leading of our housing stock. That's the kind of work that I plan to address as AG.
And you touched upon a little bit the issue of climate change. I know the current Attorney General has been strong in making sure that there's protections for our future in terms of climate. What are your ideas on that?
So once again, it's taking on the most powerful actors. What I've been doing through my career, taking on those corporations who have profited off of fossil fuels. I plan to set up a green bank where we use the penalties that we'll recover from that high stakes impact litigation that I've been doing my whole career, and put that to work in environmental justice projects and clean energy projects. So again, our legislature has put some pretty good laws on the books. We now have the next generation roadmap, which spells out where we need to get to over the coming years in our battle against climate change, but laws are only as good as they're enforced. And that's what I know how to do, is hold large corporations accountable to make sure we get to where we need to be on our goals. And I plan to be a leading attorney general across the country in the fight against climate change.
I want to spend a few moments about the primary race itself. There are 3 candidates in the race. Just walking in, we talked about how generally primary elections turnout is low. If there were an incumbent in this race, the general consensus is low turnouts tend to favor the incumbent. How do you differentiate between the other 2 candidates in the race, Andrea Campbell and Quentin Palfrey, and how do you get that message out, knowing that the number of people you're speaking to, limited number of those people, obviously just Democrats, may actually come out and vote?
I've been so excited as I've been traveling across Massachusetts talking to voters, and when people hear about me and my experience and the vision I bring for this office, they're jumping on board. So we're getting really great support. We're feeling really wonderful momentum here as we're facing the last few weeks of this primary. The main distinguishing factor between me and the other candidates in this race is my experience. I am the only candidate in this race who is an actual practicing lawyer. I have been using the court system, our legal system, for more than 20 years to make people's lives better. I've gotten hundreds of millions of dollars back in the pockets of regular people. I've won the jury trials. I've won the appeals. I am ready on day one to lead this office. I have decades that I have led teams of lawyers and made national headlines, taken on some of the biggest, most powerful interests in the country. I am by far the most experienced and qualified candidate for this position.
How has it been, where are you from, by the way, in Massachusetts?
I live in Brookline.
Brookline. So again, Eastern Mass, we talk a lot about, I mentioned earlier about how some of the gateway cities feel that they're not represented equally compared to a Boston. Western Mass as well, right? We'll say, well, they're Boston, they're 80, 90 miles away. You mentioned that there is an outpost in Springfield. How do you try to represent the entire state when a lot of what you have here is democratic values, big D democratic values, tend to be geared a lot more towards cities, but some of the small towns, say out west, may feel, how do you represent me?
Well, I have been very intentional throughout this entire campaign, the last 8 months, traveling all around Massachusetts. I've spent time in the Berkshires and the Springfield area and Central Mass, here on the South Coast. I've been out on the Cape, the North Shore. We've been everywhere.
Sure.
And so it's been very gratifying to hear from folks everywhere that what they're looking for is an experienced, accomplished lawyer who will represent them. I mean, I see this race as a job interview, and I ask the people of Massachusetts to please put my resume side by side with each of the candidates in this race and ask yourself, if you are hiring a lawyer, who would you hire to represent you? Because that's what this race is this is to be the people's lawyer, and I have represented the disenfranchised, the marginalized, in the cities and in the small towns across Massachusetts for more than 20 years, and I have brought real results for people.
One issue I wanted to bring up, but we have some time left here, is the issue of gun violence. There's been gun violence in a lot of the cities. Fall River is no different. Fortunately, a lot of the gun incidences in Fall River are shootings that unfortunately do not involve people. There have been a number of those. How do you feel we can, in Massachusetts, strengthen the strong gun laws we have now as Attorney General?
Yeah, well, this is another area where the U.S. Supreme Court has been ripping apart our rights. And over this past term, they tore away some of our basic protections, including making it harder for states to protect us from gun violence. Luckily, here in Massachusetts, we do have some very strong laws. So in Massachusetts, we have not been subject to so many of the horrific mass shootings that we keep seeing over and over, and my heart breaks every time one happens. I have 3 kids. So again, I have spent my career, more than 20 years, figuring out ways around bad Supreme Court decisions. The Supreme Court issued this decision that knocked down a New York law, which was a little different from the Massachusetts law. So it's not completely clear what impact it would have directly on Massachusetts law. The legislature has already gotten to work to amend our law here to make more specific requirements for what factors police departments can look at in deciding for whom a gun license can be issued. So it's very important that we enforce these laws, and I know how to do that in a way that will avoid preemption by the federal Supreme Court decisions. And again, that's why it's important that we have an experienced lawyer to take this on. We also have a huge problem now with the rise of ghost guns that I would take on as Attorney General, because this is a real danger. There's no need for people to have these weapons that can't be traced.
As we wrap up, I want to give you one final opportunity to speak directly to the Democrats in Fall River that may be going out to vote this primary season, and ask them why they should support Shannon Liss-Riordan.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for having me. I am just so proud of the support that our campaign has gathered over these months, and I'm really honored to have the support of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, as well as more than 50 individual labor unions, including the Mass Teachers Association, the Mass Nurses Association, the Building Trades, Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, and many more. Collectively, they represent more than 500,000 working people. I am the candidate who is ready on day one to take the helm at the People's Law Firm, because this is the work that I have been doing my whole career, fighting and winning for working people, taking on the toughest battles against the biggest, most powerful interests in America, and winning. I will fight for you, Massachusetts, and together we will win. I'd be so honored and grateful for your support on September 6th. Thank you.
All right, Shannon Liss-Riordan, Democratic candidate for Attorney General. Thank you again for coming to Fall River and visiting us here at our studio. All the best, and I say this to all the candidates: when you're successful in September, we'll invite you to come back before the November election and do this again.
Oh, look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us today here on FRC Media, and please make a point to vote on Tuesday, September 6th.